Uh, no, that's okay.
Well, piece it together.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe it's not, it's okay if it isn't. I just wondered if there was.
Just say Google that and see if you can find it.
Yes, but I still don't do well enough to know that I'm sure.
So before we bring up our next presenter, I did want to read some information. We got an interesting comment in the chat that I wanted to share from Paul Graham. I'm sorry I missed this exhibit. Attendees today may be interested to know of an exhibit now at the Southeast Ohio History Center in Athens. It's entitled Mounds, Moon, and Stars, The Legacy of Ohio's Magnificent Earthworks. It's running from March 20th to July 27th. He said, I loaned some artifacts for the exhibit from Northern Ross County from my great-grandfather's farm. My dad died and my uncle picked them up when they were kids following a horse-drawn plow through the field. So once again, that's the Southeast Ohio History Center in Athens, and the exhibit runs through July 27th. I'm going to bring Wes Clark up to introduce our next presenter.
Thank you, Chris. Again, thanks so much to Andrew for that great kickoff presentation. I've been doing historical archaeology for over 50 years, and those of us who do that, we deal with the bits and pieces. I think it's really helpful every once in a while to have a general overview like that. It's also very nice to see what the whole objects look like, instead of just the bits and pieces that we're used to. So again, thank you, Andrew. And Andrew gave us a great lead in to our next presentation, which is titled Out from Under the Floorboards, a summary of excavations at the Overfield Tavern. That presentation is by Jessica Royster and Brenda Deddy, and Brenda is going to give the presentation this morning.
Let me fix the screen sharing. Evidently, it's acting up.
It says screen sharing is on.
Right again.
No, yeah, I'm gonna have to close out of the one that's currently open from Andrew's talk.
Okay, is that one? This one? All right. So I'm going to stop and then I'll come back in.
Now you should be able to. Now we're just seeing you, so now you should be able to go to the slide. Actually, do the, oh, nope. Go back to where you just were. You just saw it. You want to pick, nope, did I think you just want to do this. Yes. Is that working now?
Somebody verify that.
No, not.
Hey. Here's all my screen. Should I go in? I'm thinking I'm going here.
We have several desktops open. Do you see that? Like, clip it up for just a moment. Pardon us, Lois. You've got a couple of desktops open. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm going to close this. So this is the one that we should be sharing. If it's not. Okay.
I'm terrible with Zoom. Can you close this window for a minute?
Mhm. It's gotta be.
Come back up. Hang on. Go back to the screen where it says share.
No, that's the sharing from PowerPoint.
Oh.
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
When do we want PowerPoint to be?
The share button should be a
I think that's
share. All right, hang on. Aha. Think I got it.
maybe. Yes. Wait,
Yeah.
something's happening.
Yes. Okay.
Zoom is not my more thing.
Sorry about that, guys. Here we go.
Here we go. Yes, it's working. Yay. Thank you.
Hey, hello, I'm Brenda. I'm with Ohio Valley Archaeology. And so I'm just going to be giving kind of a brief overview of the excavations that we did last year at the Overfield Tavern. So the Overfield Tavern is located at 201 East Water Street in historic downtown Troy. The property is on a 1/10 of an acre lot just southwest of the Great Miami River. It's a 2-story hewn log building originally constructed in 1808 by or for Benjamin and his wife Margaret Overfield. It's listed on the National Register of historic places at the state level of significance for architecture, history, and archaeology. And it is the oldest surviving structure within the boundaries of historic Troy Township. So a historic structure report was recently prepared by JKOA for the Troy Historical Society, and then based on their assessment, as well as extensive research conducted by the museum's executive director, Chris Manning, they determined that there were 6 major periods of development for the property. So there's the tavern's original construction in 1808, the addition of a rear structure connected by a now enclosed dog trot or breezeway around 1815, alterations and additions in the mid to late 19th century, a rediscovery and renovation by the Hobart Brothers Company in the 1840s and 1950s, or sorry, 1940s and 1950s, renovations by the Overfield Tavern Museum in the 1990s, and the unfortunate fire of 2024 and its immediate aftermath, leaving only the original tavern and the 1815 addition standing. So from the beginning, the Overfield Tavern has served as a pillar for the community. While it was obviously a tavern and a local hub, it also served as court until the courthouse was built in Troy, became home to a number of families up until the Hobart Brothers Company got it, and served as a nursery school, and finally as a vibrant local history museum. So here's a photo of it prior to the fire, where you can see on the back side one of the additions that unfortunately burned down. Yay, laser pointer, we found it. Okay, so now building on previous work done on the site. So exploratory work occurred at intervals since the 1990s, which resulted in some artifactual evidence and written documentation, but there was no formal reporting. So since our project, there have been 2 formal investigations done on the site. In 1997, a phase 2 by Algonquin Archaeological Consultants did 6 1-by-1 meter units and identified 2 features. So those are in green here. The first feature was thought to have been filled within a potential builder's trench in units 1 and 2, which is here. I love this. The second feature in unit 4 was interpreted as either a flagstone skirt that surrounded the tavern or a more localized pavement around a now rubble-filled well or cistern. The artifactual assemblage primarily consisted of historic artifacts, about 1,700 from the kitchen and architecture functional groups. They were the ones who actually recorded the Overfield Tavern as an archaeological site designated as 33 MI 160. They also concluded that the tavern's archaeological deposits were significant enough to recommend Overfield Tavern eligible for listing on the NRHP. And then in 2024, students from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, the kind of a little field school, it consisted of 4 1-by-1 meter test units and 3 STPs with a limited geophysical survey. So those are in yellow here. A total of 9,500 artifacts were recovered from all excavations. 2 primary areas of anomalies were identified. One was a linear anomaly that runs parallel to the tavern wall that was interpreted as a French drain, and a series of linear anomalies that were interpreted as potential remnants of previous additions or outbuildings of the tavern. So the purpose of our work, which is all done in pink here, in 2025 included the documentation of historic features and curation of recovered artifacts. We were going to support the site's restoration and prepare for future construction, engaging with the public, and providing historical publication assistance. Okay, so on to the geophysics part. So before doing any archaeology, we actually did some geophysics on site. It was conducted in advance so that we could process the data and inform some unit placement in the yard. For this, we use GPR, which is on the left, and an electromagnetic induction meter, which is on the right. So on the left here are the results from the radar. The red areas here show strong radar reflectors, while blue areas produced weak reflections. And then on the right is the EM data. This image shows how electrically conductive the ground is, with red areas being more conductive and blue areas being less conductive. So the result identified some anomalies. 13 anomalies of potential interest were identified while analyzing the geophysical data. Anomaly 1, which is here, it's a rectilinear foundation readily visible only in the radar data, marking the location of a shaft-type feature. Based on its size, this feature was interpreted to be a possible cellar with distinct foundation walls on all sides. This is likely what was partially encountered in Unit 4 during the 1997 excavations. Anomalies 2 and 3, oh gosh, there it is, are possible shaft-type features potentially associated with privy seen on historic Sanborn maps. Anomaly 4, which is a large one, is a possible area of fill or building rubble in the area where Algonquin excavated Unit 1 and interpreted as a builder's trench. Anomaly 5, which is over here, is a shaft-like feature that was the location of a cellar associated with the northern addition, and was filled with gravel after the fire for safety reasons. Anomaly 6, oh gosh, there's so many. Is an area of strong radar reflections that may represent a small gravel-filled pit at a junction point in a utility or drainage line. 7 is a rectilinear area of high conductivity anomalies that corresponds with the location of the northeastern addition, so that's all here. And then anomalies 8 through 13 were possible utilities or drainage lines. Into the excavation. So we did 2 types of excavations, both interior and exterior. So these ones took place within the original tavern room known as the parlor, or which is P on the map here. It is an approximately 184 square foot room. Prior to excavations, all of the loose soil and artifacts were swept up and screened. As you can see, there's a lot of loose debris on the surface. Due to the presence of stabilizing cinder blocks, poured concrete, and a corner fireplace, we excavated about 105 square feet of the room. The southern half was excavated in 3 units, and once it was evident that there were no distinct changes in the soils, the northern half was excavated as a single unit. During excavations, part of the original stacked stone foundation was uncovered along the west wall. Only part of the foundation was exposed to minimize the potential for future damage or destabilization. Next, we have the dog cart or the breezeway. It is an approximately 108 square foot room connecting the original tavern to the 1815 addition, which is D. It's now enclosed, but likely only had a roof when it was originally constructed. This room got the same treatment as the parlor. Loose soil and artifacts were swept up and screened. And we started digging in halves, but when we knew the soils and figured out it was pretty much about the same, we ended up digging it all at once. It's a relatively small area. And here is where we start seeing pockets of ash. So you can see that, it's kind of hard to see in the photo, but in the profile drawing, you can see some ash pockets here. Next, we have the kitchen, or what was originally interpreted as a kitchen, just K, just north of the dog trot. It's a 169 square foot room, which we excavated about 120 square feet of due to the presence of a fireplace and some utilities. Because artifacts were already collected from the surface in 1995, there was no need to do a surface sweep like the parlor and dog trot. It was all excavated as a single unit. And here, the ashland continues from the dog trot into the kitchen area and takes up about almost the entire southern half of the room itself. And just below this, we actually find our first feature in the southeast corner of the room, which includes 2 circular pockets of ash within an oval-shaped area of burned earth and crushed brick. This feature is likely indicative of a cooking or heating feature that was there prior to the construction of the addition. To the yard. Here's a lovely overview aerial photo of our yard excavations. So over here we have the northern addition, which had burned down. Here is the eastern addition, another addition that burned down. And then here is a test unit over anomaly 1, geophysical anomaly 1. Starting with the east addition, which is E on the map here. This was approximately 364 square feet, according to the auditor data, of which we excavated about 256 square feet. We split it into 6 2x2 meter units. There was no evidence of it sharing any architectural elements with the extant structures, meaning the tavern and the kitchen and dog trot here, which further supports the mid to late 19th century construction date. And the only ashlands that we encountered in this addition was in the northwest corner adjacent to the kitchen. Here you can see the review when we're done. The north addition, which is up here in, based on county auditor data, this was originally 169 square feet. For safety reasons, we only excavated about 35 square feet of this. So you can see here is the gravel filling the cellar that used to be there. And then there's also some stacked stone walls for the sidewalk and the previous structure that was there. So this was close to the shared wall with the kitchen, and soils there contain a high density of broken and eroded brick fragments and cobbles. So it's possible that this debris is from the removal of an original brick fireplace in the kitchen that may have been removed either before modern modifications or when the north addition was built itself. To the anomaly, which is A1 here. So we placed a 2x2 meter unit over geophysical anomaly 1. At about 20 centimeters below the surface, we encountered an L-shaped line of cut stone, which correlated with the corner of the suspected foundation in the anomaly. From here, we continued excavating only within the cut stone walls. Voids were present in the soil matrix, largely created by all of this brick and a bunch of other building rubble. So because of that, and because the feature extended so deeply, we dug a small window into it here to see the bottom. So here's more of the rubble in the wall here. And then here is the window down to the bottom, which extended about 2 meters below the ground surface. And it was actually marked by a purposefully laid brick layer. So looking at Sanborn maps, this one's from 1892. Here is our L stacked stone wall, and it almost matches this brick structure here. And then by 1911, the brick structure is gone. It still kind of lines up with this, but it's been replaced by a frame structure. And then in 1947, everything is gone over there. So based on this, it's likely that this was probably some type of cellar that was filled with brick debris from the brick building seen in 1892. So it's probably this between when that was demolished and this was built here. Onto the shovel test. So we dug 4 shovel tests judgmentally across the yard. It's a very small yard. There's already been a lot of work done here. But we did place one of them overlapping the edge of geophysical anomaly 4. So here's shovel test 1, lines here, which was the possible area of fill or building rubble. And as you can see, I think we got the edge of it here. We didn't excavate it completely just because we didn't want to disturb it any further in case somebody wanted to do more work into that. But it confirmed that the anomaly probably was from an area of architectural fill. Onto the fun stuff. Okay, so looking at the big picture, not counting those that could only be weighed, We collected a total of 17,689 artifacts across all excavations. Of this, 68% were recovered from the interior excavations. Interesting, as you know, the excavated square footage was nearly the same for the interior and the exterior, about 330 square feet or so. And when you break this down further by the individual areas, artifacts from the dog trot make up 40% of the entire assemblage. And given its location north of the tavern and then, you know, eventually connecting the tavern to this kitchen, it's likely that this was a common area for refuse disposal. Then when you break things down by their artifactual functional group, unsurprisingly, the largest representation of artifacts is from the kitchen and food remains group, because it was a tavern. Architectural also has a large presence due to the number of modifications the site has seen over the past 200 years. And in this case, other includes like literally everything else. So here I just wanted to give some examples of the fun artifacts from the other categories because I think they're worth mentioning. They're very worth mentioning. So here we have some stone marbles. A Lincoln log, very cute. These are some hand-carved buttons. As you can see, they were definitely done by hand. Some sewing implements. So we have a wooden spool, a brass thimble, and a couple of brass straight pins. Here's a piece of cotton textile with some decorative fringe on the bottom. It's been purposely cut up here. A lot of leather shoe fragments, especially on the inside, the interior excavations. This one is a bone, carved bone lice comb, which is kind of gross. This is a kaolin tobacco pipe fragment, probably decorated with a bird, but there wasn't enough to completely identify that. A slate pencil. And then probably like the most exciting one for everybody was this 1817 minted 50-cent coin that we recovered from the parlor. Okay, so looking at two of the biggest categories, starting with the faunal food remains. This largely consisted of large mammals, which we count as like pig, deer, cow, bird, like chicken and turkey, and fish. So most of it was large mammal. Benjamin Overfield was said to have been a frequent deer hunter, and records show that he owned a large number of pigs, which I think were the most identifiable among the faunal remains. So of the large mammals, 42% of these did show signs of modification, which includes cut, chop, and saw marks, likely from food processing. Here we have a fragment of a deer antler, which the skull where the antler would attach here, and where the red arrow is pointing here along this line is a cut mark. Here's some cow bones. So this one is a distal femoral epiphysis that wasn't unfused, meaning it was a younger individual. And here, it's kind of hard to see, but where the red arrow is pointing is a cut mark. And then these two are of the same bone. They are the proximal tibia from a cow, and you could see some saw marks here. Here are some fragments from the skull of a pig. So skull here, we've got some teeth. This one's from a juvenile because it was probably unerupted. It's not completely formed yet. And then some more pig. These are probably from the same mandible, a juvenile. You don't have all your molars erupted here, and there are some clear chop marks along these margins here. Now the kitchen ceramics. So this is probably one of the largest artifact types encountered, with over 3,700 artifacts. Of all the excavated areas, the dog trot contained the largest number of sherds with the most variety of types, which is significant given its small size. While we had representation from all of the major groups, pearlware was the most represented, which makes sense given the time period. Excuse me. And then when looking at the refined earthenwares themselves, there were 8 major broadly characterized decoration types, which includes your slipped and dipped wares, edgeware, hand painted, transfer print, cut sponge, luster, Maiolica, and Rockingham. Of these, the hand painted was the most frequent, then the transfer print, and then the edgeware. So here you have some slip and dip wares. These are banded. We've got some rilling here. I love these. These are variegated. And then love the mocha ware. Edgewares were very common as well. We had both blue and green. The one on the left is an asymmetrical scalloped edge, impressed. This one is an impressed shell edge. And then this one is impressed with a little chicken foot design. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a light. Here are some of the hand painted. So we had, most of them were represented either by cobalt painted or polychrome with some cobalt painting as well. My favorite. We have all of the colors of transfer prints. Green, red, pink. This is actually a specific pattern called Ninon. This brown has an overglazed enamel. I love this he's just a little guy on a horse. And then this one, I, from 2 different levels, was able to piece together and see that there are soldiers with cannons firing in front of a building here. Then we've got our cut sponge, some copper luster, 1 fragment of Maiolica, and here is a piece of Rockingham. And then one of the most rewarding things for the entire project was the public archaeology component. So on October 11th, we had the Young Historians group associated with the Overfill Tavern. They assisted with exterior excavations of the East Edition, some SDPs, and screening. We also had some lovely volunteers throughout the days we were there, just helping us screen and get through the large amount of artifacts. And then on October 12th, we hosted a family archaeology day on site. A few of us dressed in period clothing and set up some tables with some hands-on activities related to archaeology and the time period. We were also able to set up a mock dig thanks to the tavern staff and volunteers. So while the kids were able to get involved with some of the activities, we also saw a number of local visitors who were really interested in the tavern's recovery and local history. We also had the privilege of preparing artifacts for the Heartland show. We loved. In addition to this presentation, we'll also be doing one in Troy sometime this summer. And eventually, we're also going to be assisting the Overfield staff in publishing the results of this work. Say thank you to all my people at OVAI, Chris, Alyssa, and Ben from the Overfield Tavern, and then the rest of the Overfield Tavern board members and volunteers. The Museum of Troy History for letting us use their bathroom. And the St. Patrick's Soup Kitchen, which I think helped do a lot of the preparation of the yard and things like that. Questions?
So with the archaeological investigation, was that precipitated by the fire where it became one of these things where, hey, we have this access now, this stuff has to be rebuilt, should we just do this?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think they're going to use some of the artifacts that we found to kind of repurchase because they did lose a lot of artifacts of like their collections in the fire. So I think they're going to use kind of what we found to make new exhibits with maybe some fuller ceramics and stuff.
Did the tavern fund your excavation?
They did.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. They received a lot of donations, grants and things like that. So
So the tavern began in 1808. When did it stop being or was it converted at one point to like a residence?
yeah, so it was the tavern early on, and then I think probably I think it's the mid 1800s is about when it stopped, and then converted to the residence up until the 40s.
19.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any like smaller patternings
within the house for different activity areas. You looked at like more of like a domestic area of the parlor, and then you have the dog trough, pretty interesting, when it was open, it probably was a major activity area, so.
Yeah, I think so. I think before it was built, since there was like well, it was less than 10 years, but I think before it was built, they were probably using that as an open kitchen kind of outside with all the ash being out there. I'm not kind of hard to tell because there wasn't really much in the way of artifacts like in that first feature. I think there was only 10 that we pulled out of the ashy circles. But I think before that was probably used as like a major preparation area because the tavern itself is pretty small.
No, I don't see any, no.
Thank you.
So much.
All right, we're gonna take a 10-minute break before our next presentation, so be back at 10:55.
So now we know how to switch
Yeah.
back to the next one, yeah.
That was, my first instinct was to say, Eric.
You're right.
Yeah.
No, Zoom was never my forte with other things, but
It's just, there's always something that like trips you up, that
Yeah.
you're like, wait, what?
with the one thing right that I have to do.
It seems to be working well. So,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Okay. Hopefully the folks on Zoom can hear me now. Okay. So yeah. So all this 20th century urban development up on West 25th Street, placing downward pressure on the hillside. So the U.S. DOT Maritime Administration was funding this project to stabilize the hillside. But because it was already known that the hillside was a National Register listed archaeological district, we had to go through the Section 106 consultation with Cleveland Metro Parks, with the city of Cleveland. Ohio Archaeological Council was involved. And so we worked out a data recovery plan. Right. So the history of Irishtown Bend goes back to the mid-19th century, when Irish immigrants first started coming to North America in large numbers, particularly in Cleveland. They settled all up and down the Cuyahoga River, west of what was then downtown Cleveland. And they were relegated to these marginal environments, such as this hillside, which has roughly 45-degree slope. This image, you can sort of see that there are also some historical photographs, which I don't think we included in this presentation, but you can see buildings where, one edge of the building is at ground level, and then the other side of the building is on stilts, because that's how they had to build on this hillside. Irishtown began to take shape in the 1850s. It was a predominantly Irish neighborhood until the 1880s. At that point, with Cleveland expanding westward and immigrants from other places, particularly Eastern Europe, starting to come to Cleveland in larger numbers. In the late 19th century, a noticeable number of Hungarian and Polish immigrants started moving into this neighborhood as the Irish, second generation Irish, were becoming more successful, able to move to better neighborhoods. It was still sort of a mixed neighborhood into the early 20th century. One of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later that we have found, though, is that there was this idea that the hillside was essentially completely abandoned by around 1910. We found that is actually not the case. There were at least some Hungarian immigrants still living on the hillside as late as around 1930. After that, once the hillside was abandoned, the city bought up the property. Again, they let it overgrow. You can see here, this is essentially what the hillside has looked like since probably the 1930s, 1940s. That large building that you can see in the distance, that is public housing from the mid-20th century. Again, that's an example of the urban development that was putting this downward pressure. But you can sort of see in this image, you can see the sort of two terraces. You've got the river, it comes up a bit, there's one terrace, and then it goes up a bit again, there's another terrace, and then it rises up to West 25th Street. So in the late 1980s, David Brose and Alfred Lee from the Cleveland Museum of Natural History took an interest in Irishtown Bend. Of course, they had done all kinds of work around Cleveland. And so they initiated a project of public archaeology that was very successful. They discovered some very interesting things about how the stratigraphy works on a 45-degree slope, which we rediscovered in 2023. But it was as a result of their work that the Irishtown Bend Archaeological District was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1992. And then in 1994, ASC Group was hired by the city of Cleveland to do an archaeological survey. So Brose and Lee, they had focused mostly on the southern half of the hillside. ASC Group did a survey of the northern half, and they found some additional archaeological resources that they said are probably eligible to be part of the Irishtown Bend Archaeological District, though the district was never formally expanded to include those resources. All right, so this map shows the overall hillside. Again, most of the documented resources that were assigned Ohio Archaeological Inventory numbers are on the southern half of the hillside, which you can see down here near the elevated bridge. We actually initially we did some monitoring. There was a bunch of geotechnical boring and other activities on the hillside to try to figure out how the stabilization was going to work. So we had to monitor that. But then in 2023, we got to go out and do data recovery excavations. Excuse me. So we decided to focus specifically on sites that Brose and Lee did not cover, because we figured they had already collected tens of thousands of artifacts from those sites. And so we selected three parcels that they had not touched as a way of expanding the database. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Megan to talk about what we found.
Hello. All right. So to better understand the residents of these three sites, we drew on a wide range of resources, including U.S. Census records, city directory records, historic maps, and also we had assistance from the Irish American Archives Society, which provided details on the families of Irishtown. So starting with the 1886 Sanborn Fire Insurance map, it shows our two parcels. So the map depicts two store buildings at 449 and 451 West River Road to the north, and a dwelling at 479 West River Road and 49 Franklin Alley to the south. So in the 1880s, the population was mostly Irish. These census records bring to life people like William and Mary Fergus, who owned a neighborhood grocery, the two store buildings that were shown on the previous map, and Daniel and Mary McHugh, who ran the saloon next door. We also see working families like Michael and Bridget Welsh and John and Alice Allen. Michael and John worked as day laborers. The Irish American Archives Society was able to find a newspaper clipping that recounted a burglary occurring at the saloon. About, I think they said $20 worth of crockery was stolen from the saloon. So I just thought that was really interesting, because we did end up finding a lot of crockery in the privy behind the saloon. So the 1896 Sanborn Fire Insurance map doesn't show too much change, that we still have the two storefronts to the north. The dwellings do appear to have some additions built onto them, and we also see an increase in population in the census records. So by 1900, the census record showed a general increase in residents and a growing presence of Hungarian immigrants in the area. Anna Marduk had taken over the grocery at 449 River Road. She lived there with family members who worked as a laundress, a printer's typesetter, and a railroad section man. At the saloon next door at 451 West River Road, the household had grown to 14 people, including the McHughes, Fillions, Brady's, and Wines. Their occupations reflected a working class community: boilermakers, insurance agents, day laborers, factory seamstresses, a printer's typesetter, and others keeping house or attending school. And then to the south at 479 West River Road, you have the O'Brien family, which was a household of 7, which included an expressman and a copyist. So by 1912, when it was thought that the hillside had mostly been abandoned, we still see some people residing. You do see the disappearance of some of the buildings. So there was a bit of decline in population. And then the 2 buildings to the north were no longer categorized as stores, they're just marked as dwellings. And then the streets were renamed. So instead of West River Road, it is now Riverbed Road. So the property that used to be a grocery was now just a household of 10, including the Wessels, McAdams, McHughes. They worked at factory jobs, such as a canning factory, and also at the railroad. At the saloon property, 1636 Riverbed Road, John and Nellie Ferry lived with their daughters, and John worked as a chandelier maker. And then at the property at the south, we see Andy Squash, who was census identified as an Austrian Slovak, likely from the Kingdom of Hungary. He was also in the same home as the last census documented, but he was employed as a molder in an iron foundry at this time. So the 1925 Sanborn map shows that most of the dwellings had disappeared or been taken down. But the 1930 census shows that there was still people being recorded at those addresses, so that's very interesting. And then we see on these census records that a lot of the residents of this area had moved into industry jobs such as bottle works, rag shops, auto factories, and iron foundries. So that provides us some of the context for when we're looking at the material and the units. So our excavations began with us clearing all of the vegetation on the hillside. There was tons and tons and tons of weeds that would grow back within a week. It was endless. Lots and lots of chopping. So because of the overburden from the 20th century buildings on top of the hill, we had to dig really deep. I think one of our features ended up being 8 feet deep. We had to do a lot of benching and stepping. Overall, there were 30 excavation units totaling 45 square meters. We encountered multiple features, including foundation walls, brick-lined two-seater privy at the back of the saloon property. That one's pictured on the left side of the screen. We also found, in the privy, it was stratified. So the deepest layers contained slip-banded yellowware, Rockingham, Maholica, cut sponge decorated ceramics, while the top layers had more mid-century ceramics. At the southern parcel, we found a wooden fence, a brick cistern, and a cesspit. The cesspit we found on the last day, 2 hours before we were supposed to end our dig, so that was great. Thanks, Adam, for finishing that. Some of my favorite artifacts we encountered was this home rule pipe with the Irish harp, and this ginger beer bottle from the Double Eagle Bottling Co., Cleveland, Ohio. There's quite a bit of consumption medicine bottles encountered and a small toy cup made out of metal. We also found the lid to what is called a Alexandria feeding bottle. They're also referred to as murder bottles because the self-feeding tubes spread harmful bacteria. So those are a couple of the artifacts we found in field. There were 60,000 collected, so we're still in the process of cataloging all of them. So more detailed insights into the daily life of Irish Town are still to come.
All right, yeah, I particularly, apart from just, how weird and unusual this artifact is, I think it's a great reminder of the fact that this was a working class neighborhood. These types of baby bottles in the late 19th century were particularly popular with working class women who had to keep their children occupied, had to feed them while the mothers were working. So, all right. So like any urban project, this one was a good example of the things that we always need to keep in mind when you're working in a complex urban area. Even though there had been a good bit of archaeology done on the hillside previously, there were still some local legends that were reflected in that earlier work, such as the fact that the hillside was functionally abandoned by around 1915. That is almost certainly, we know that wasn't true, not only from the census data, but also from the artifacts that we were finding, particularly at that southern site with the cesspit and the cistern. We were finding artifacts from the 1920s in stratigraphically secure contexts. So we know that people were still living there. We should have included a picture of one of the profiles of our units, because site formation processes are tricky in any urban environment, but on a 45-degree slope, as you can imagine, we're digging level units, but then, you get down 50 centimeters into this unit and the layers are just like this. They're all at 45-degree angles. And so figuring out like what's overburden, what's, sloughed down the hill over the years versus what's an actually intact layer. It took us a couple of units to figure that out, right? So that does only account for a small percentage of those 60,000 artifacts we collected, though, until we figured out what was going on. And we even went into it knowing that was going to be the case, but then actually having to deal with it is a whole different issue. But then just, the fact that this is, in any urban area, urban archaeology is my favorite. As I said, I was trained as an urban archaeologist. A lot of people, certainly a lot of our clients, say, well, there can't possibly be anything left, right? It's all been disturbed. No, actually, urban areas are some of the best places to do archaeology because subsequent development has actually protected what lies underneath. And so through the combination of archival research and archaeological research, we've been able to explore this aspect of Cleveland's history, shed some new light on some old truths that people thought they knew. All of the collections from the Cleveland Museum excavations are now actually at Cleveland State University with Phil Winiarka. When we're done with our project, our collections are going to go there as well, so that his students will have the opportunity to do additional research beyond what we have the budget for. So yeah, just overall, this was a great project and one that I'm really glad to have been a part of. Oh, right. Thank you. There is an acknowledgement slide too. Thanks. Any questions?
With the stabilization finished now, are there any places that might even have archaeological potential left, or is that pretty much obliterated with the process?
Good question. So one of the tasks we haven't gotten around to yet is to do an analysis of, so the stabilization involved some cutting, but also some filling. So we're going to have to do some awesome GIS mapping. Megan will be doing that to figure out, like these are the areas where their stuff is actually got buried even deeper.
Yeah.
These are the areas where it got, and then we'll be updating the National Register documentation to reflect that. Yeah.
So as Bob indicated earlier, the Ohio Archaeological Council, we were a consulting party on this project, and I just want to congratulate you guys for the work that you did. And when will the final report be completed? So
Unfortunately, I can't tell you that because
you're
probably anybody who works in consulting work knows how the funding sometimes works. Yeah, it comes in and out. We've had some issues on this project. We're trying to get restarted, haven't gotten the green light just yet. So yeah, it might be another couple years.
this is a project that the council was involved in, I don't know, for many, many years. So
Yeah.
it had fits and starts, but
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks. Yep. Joni?
On Flatland or Highland, yes, the slope is gonna be a large place, but if you've gone to Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, slopes are always built on.
Right. Yeah.
With a swampy area, is it particularly nasty area than some other?
No, it's just, I mean, the slope is particularly steep. And so building on it was particularly tricky. And that's why it was inhabited by, the poorest, newest immigrants. And, who those immigrants were kept changing over time based on, as new groups came in. So that's all we mean by marginal urban environment. It's not a place that, the white wealthy residents of Cleveland were going to be living. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Bob and Megan. We're gonna take about 5 minutes before our next presentation.
So, yeah. Sure.
might be. Well,
Yeah, and that was just last year, and they've been suspended for a year, and then the school year. But I don't know, like, it's always like dinner, something, it's about, so I'm not sure, like, I'm definitely. No, it's great.
No, he muted it again.
Okay, we're gonna get started again. This is gonna be our last presentation before our lunch break. Oops. Let me make sure audio is on. Hide this panel. So next up is Andy Sewell from Lahan and Associates. He's going to be presenting on 4 decades of archaeological investigations at the Shaker community of Union Village. So here we go.
Thank you. Morning. Today's talk is going to be an overview of 4 decades of archaeological investigations at the former Shaker community of Union Village in Warren County. These are resulted from various cultural resources projects over these decades. I've been involved in Shaker archaeology for just over 20 years now, beginning with the North Family Lot Project in 2005 ODOT, and continuing with projects for SR 63 road widening in Warren County, and in Cuyahoga County at the former North Union Shaker settlement. Union Village was a hub of a Western Shaker settlement.
First thing is going to Pennsylvania.
Oh, someone's muted. Okay. It was a hub of Western Shaker settlements in the 19th century. It covered over 4,500 acres of agrarian landscape. It had 9 communal lots at its peak.
Just the weekend.
Today, very little remains on the landscape of a once vibrant example of religious communal living. Modern development has removed nearly every Shaker building, and even the archaeological remnants are under threats today. There we go. The Shakers were a religious communal society established in New England in the 18th century, founded by its charismatic leader, Ann Lee, now a major motion picture. The Shakers believed in communal living, severing the bonds of the outside world, even marriage. They organized their villages into communal family lots according to seniority and devotion. Self-sufficiency and devotion to simple design to their crafts and products characterize the Shakers. The name Shakers come from the tradition of including dance in their worship services. The establishment of Union Village has its roots in the Great Awakening movement of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, which was a period of religious fervor in what was then the western frontier of the United States. Charismatic preachers and tent revivals attracted large crowds, and the Shakers in the eastern states saw an opportunity to spread the word about their own beliefs and gain new converts. So in 1805, the Shakers sent missionaries out to Kentucky and Ohio, and they arrived in Turtle Creek Township in Warren County and converted a local Presbyterian preacher, Richard McNamara. He had recently split from the wider church due to perceived heretical views. McNamara recognized kindred spirits in the Shakers, and he brought his congregation into the fold as a new Shaker community. McNamara's charisma and organizational skills cemented the Turtle Creek community as the hub from which other Western Shaker communities would turn to for guidance. Union Village developed from a series of small pioneer log cabins into 9 communal lots by the 1820s. The Shakers offered a stable society that attracted people who struggled in the frontier setting of early Ohio, as well as those disaffected by mainstream religion. By the 1840s, Union Village had about 600 members and was largely self-sufficient through agriculture and crop production. However, one key tenet of the Shaker faith, celibacy, started to affect the viability of Shaker communities throughout the nation. Combined with the diversification of economic opportunities in the wider world, Shaker communities began to decline in population as an effect. By the 1870s, the aging population of Union Village began to increasingly rely on the labor of tenant farmers and hired laborers. In the 1890s, a final attempt at rejuvenating Union Village was made, resulting in remodeling of the center family house into a high-style Victorian edifice and the erection of a train station. However, this movement failed to attract new young converts, and in 1913, the few remaining Shakers here sold their community to the United Brethren. Union Village would become Otterbein homes, used by the United Brethren to provide for the elderly and for orphans while maintaining the tenant farming practices. United Brethren sold off a lot of their land, including to the state prison system and to a steel company to develop a park for their employees. Most recently, a spate of development has resulted in wide-scale changes to a once agrarian landscape. The Shaker family lot system is a reflection of their beliefs. Briefly, family lots were used to segregate the most experienced, established members from the newest converts, along with some lots serving special purposes. At Union Village, the original family lots corresponded to pioneer farms as the first converts, these being the center, the east, the south, and the west frame families. By about 1830, the family lots were fully established, including the center family associated with the church order of most experienced Shakers. Intermediate orders were at the south and west brick lots, a gathering order of newer Shakers at the north family lot, and youth orders at the west frame and west family lot. Communal houses are also present at the gristmill lot, also known as the mill family, and the square house lot operated a tannery and a sawmill. So the early investigations in the 1980s have these started in the 1980s, dating back. A lot of these actually happened to avoid the location of communal lots simply for design, so we didn't encounter anything really that significant. In 1980, the first survey was for a sewer line. It did encounter a brick foundation that we now interpret as possibly being the gristmill community house. We also identified a brick scatter near the square family lot that we think may be a episode of brick production. Surveys for road improvements in 1985 and 1986 identified the Station Creek site. There's WA 0404. That's at the crossroads, State Route 741-63. At the time identified as a concentration of early 19th century artifacts suggestive of a pioneer cabin. No map or archival evidence places a Shaker building here, but it would have been squarely within the Union Village property. So to determine if this site did represent a Shaker residential site, comparative artifact samples were needed from known Shaker communal lots. So what happened was ODOT archaeologists then started looking around for like artifact scatters in the fields behind some of these lots, and he found the one behind the North family lot, and then also what appeared to be a pottery waster dump near the West brick lot. And then in 2002, a road widening project along the western edge of Union Village identified surface scatter, which let's see if we can find, here's our laser point right here in this term. That's where the train station was. You can still see the rail line right here. In 2005, a realignment of a sharp curve on State Route 741 right here sparked the extensive data recovery investigations in North Family Lot, which resulted in a 4-volume report. Until recently, this investigation represented the most intensive archaeological work at Union Village site. In 2018, archaeological investigations for housing developments here encountered some remnants of Shaker buildings associated with the Center family down in here, but also extensive disturbance from demolition and prior development. And then the following year, initial reconnaissance and geophysical surveys for the Warren 63 road widening project identified the potential for significant archaeological resources, the location of the Station Creek site, West Brick family, and the West Frame family, and also identified a big brick cluster identified as a possible brick clamp. So subsequent data recovery investigations in 2022 revealed important new information about Union Village at 3 of these sites. Features that their West Brick family were happening to be able to be avoided. So that site's still fully intact. So let's go to the next slide if it will let me. Trying to get. There we go. Okay, for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to focus on the projects I've personally been involved with over the last 20 years, which is the Phase 3 data recovery investigations for the 741 curve realignment for the North Family Lot and the State Route 63 road widening project that affected the West Frame Lot, the Station Creek site, and newly identified brick clamp. So the report for that latter project is still under production. The 2005 investigations at North Family Lot resulted in recovery of significant archaeological and historical information about Union Village. We uncovered 5 buildings, a well and a cistern, along with rubbish pits and stone walks. The artifact assemblage here included thousands of oyster sherds from Shaker pottery that is operated here from 1836 to about into the 1840s. We found evidence for craft production and economic interactions with the outside world. That was present in the form of tools, stamps, and stencils. The work here provided a baseline for comparison with archaeological deposits at other sites in Union Village. So the communal house here was built in 1823 and stood until 1965 when it was destroyed in a firefighting training exercise. The excavations revealed the full basement and part of the kitchen basement here, with evidence for original interior partitions and later Otterbein period improvements. The basement design included 2 sets of stairs, exterior window wells, 2 interior rooms, 4 sets of chimney bases, and an exterior basement addition set in the northeast corner, being the left side of the house when you're facing it. In addition, we determined that the rear kitchen wing was originally a standalone building that was connected later to the house during the Shaker period. Shop buildings identified in North Family Lot include the Brother Shop, the Pottery Broom Shop, the Sister Shop, and the Green Shop. The Brother Shop is likely the earliest here and in form greatly resembled a communal house with a cellar entrance on the same northeast corner as the communal house, 2 sets of chimney bases, interior room partitions. The other shop buildings had only partial or no cellars. The Pottery Broom Shop shows how Shakers modified existing buildings and new purposes as they needed. As this building was originally a small blacksmith shop on a brick foundation, then there was an addition on a stone foundation and was converted into a pottery shop in 1836. And finally, a second floor became the broom shop circa 1850. The Green Shop here is shown had a rough stone foundation with 2 interior stone chimney pads. It was a framed 2-story building. Sister Shop was the last major building erected by the Shakers at Union Village in 1854. It supported fiber industries that was practiced by Shaker women. That building was 3-story tall and had a half cellar. So moving ahead to the 2020s, the Warren 63 projects. So here in 2022, we started data recovery excavations at 3 Shaker sites impacted by the widening of this project. This is a West Frame Lot, Station Creek site, and a suspected brick clamp, which was assigned site number WA 1038. Field studies here included 2 rounds of geophysical survey, one in 2019 after the initial phase 1, and the other in 2022 right before the data recovery. And the archaeological investigations range from shovel tests, unit sampling, blocks, and metal detection for large-scale mechanical excavations. So analysis of results and archival research is still going on for this project. I can talk about some of the initial findings right here. So West Frame Lot. So this is one of the earliest family lots at Union Village, established in 1816. By late 19th century, the dwindling Shakers had largely moved their population to the central village, leasing some of the outlying lots to tenant farmers, including the West Frame Lot. Otterbein Homes continued its practice up to 1930 when they sold the West Farms to the state, becoming the Lebanon State Prison Farm in 1932. Specifically, the West Frame Lot was converted to the Honor Farm as part of this system. The buildings you can see here are all part of that Honor Farm. The only remaining Shaker building I'm going to point out right here is this one right here. This was converted into a blacksmith shop and a carpenter shop by the prison. But this building is the original kitchen building. It was a 2-story building originally, and what they did is they took off this top story and turned it into and filled in the basement to make the blacksmith shop. So this prison farm operated up to about 2016, and then many of the original Shaking buildings here were probably demolished when the prison took it over in the middle of the 20th century. So our field work here, we start off with shovel test units, sampling blocks, figure out artifact distribution. We did manual test unit excavation to examine some of the geophysical anomalies, and finish up with mechanical stripping, which included removal of demolition fill from building cellars. Come on now. Okay, so here's the communal house at the West Frame Lot. So this is where it gets its name. It was a frame building, so that's why it got that name. It was built in 1816. Here's a photo. It was taken in probably late 19th century, early 20th century. Shows it's 2 stories, attic, interior brick chimneys on either end. While it was a frame construction, its design and appearance really follow most of the other buildings at Union Village. It wasn't anything too different about this one. Had a covered cellar entrance on the southwest corner. You can see at the rear end that brick 2-story kitchen building, and it was attached to later on to the communal house with an addition, same as with the North Family Lot. Excavation of the house showed out a foundation of irregular, rough-shaped limestone blocks that was 2 feet thick. It wasn't intact when we got to it, having its upper courses removed when it was demolished. So we couldn't tell if it had window wells like the North family lot. It had a cement floor, likely added during the Otterbein occupation, uncovered the eastern third of the basement floor, suggesting at least one interior partition. There's a small section of a stone flagging still present up in the northwest corner. It had a French drain made of shaker brick. There were stone pier supports that were probably original shaker features. And then there were concrete pier supports in the eastern third that are associated with the renovations by the Otterbein folks. Curiously, we didn't find any evidence at all for interior brick chimney piers. They really should have been here. We found zero evidence, nothing even in the walls. So that's kind of a mystery. Some of our excavations here inside the dirt floor, very few shaker period artifacts. However, we did find 2 polished slate slabs that came out of the rubble fill that have like an incised design on them. It could represent something that was of special significance to the Shakers. One of the other buildings we found here was the pork shop. This was a 2-story brick building built in 1828, had a foundation built of regularly cut limestone blocks. Here you can see a drain line crossing across a feature that was installed during the prison farm period. Had an exterior cellar entrance on the southwest corner, like the communal house. And then similar to the brother shop at the North family lot, there's evidence for internal room partitions from the arrangement of non-load bearing interior brick foundations. Here we can see 2 rooms in the west half and 1 large room in the east. 2 sets of interior brick chimney supports. And in our units here, we did find some evidence for pork processing. This was reportedly a slaughterhouse for the Shakers. We found a lot of pig bones. Some had butchery marks. Other activities here probably occurred. We did find some slag and some copper scrap. And it seems likely this building was probably demolished soon after Otterbein took it over. Had a couple other buildings we found out. We got permission from the prison to expose the north half of the wash house, even though it's outside the project area. So this was a frame building. It sat on a rough limestone block foundation. Some of our research suggests it was moved across the road soon after Otterbein got it. They converted it into a dorm building. So while we didn't have any authorization to excavate beyond the surface exposure, we did identify this building had a cellar, and it was full of bottles. And we actually found a shaker cough syrup bottle. It was identical to one we found at the North family lot. And then we had an unanticipated building that wasn't really apparent in the geophysical data. And if this was found west of the pork shop, it's kind of a mystery. So what we have a stone chimney base, kind of similar to what we've seen in stone log cabins elsewhere. There's an interior brick foundation, and then a small cellar or an excavated area in the opposite end from the chimney base, and it has a thermal stain here in this excavated area, but not over by the chimney base where you might expect to find something like that. Instead, in front of the chimney was a fairly deep, steep-sided pit that was excavated right in front of it. So this possible building would have been about 25 feet long, 8 feet wide. We thought maybe it was an early pioneer cabin because this was one of the early pioneer sites. But there's we didn't find any other foundations or anything like that. So some alternate excavations here is it could be possibly a smokehouse associated with pork shop, or maybe even something like a maple syrup furnace, because we know the Shakers did produce their own maple syrup. And then another odd thing was just south of this building, you can see kind of in the upper right in this photo, was a large rectangular pit, had a bright yellow clay lining. So when we excavated this, we found a deliberate single active filling from the top 60 centimeters. And below this was a zone of multiple striations, thin bands of dark silty clay loam and yellow clay extending to about 100 centimeters below surface. We didn't find too much out of this feature, but all of them were associated with Shaker occupation. It might represent a privy or some other type of feature. We're not quite sure of that yet. So moving on, we got to return to the Station Creek site identified in 1980s. So our follow-up work here, so 2019, OVA did a geophysical survey, identified 10 anomalies. While only 2 were within the project area, interpreted as a possible privy and a possible cellar, we did receive permission to go a little further south to look at another anomaly identified as a possible well. So we use metal detection, limited test units, and mechanical stripping to identify this site. Metal detection was tend to determine if ephemeral building locations could be identified, not identified in the geophysical survey. So through this, we recovered 347 metal artifacts, which at least 137 represent early 19th century deposition. While certainly affected by plowing over 200 years, there are some indications of clustering. So hand forged nails, we found it's not represented here, kind of clustered in this area right here. There's a big cluster of artifacts. So here, mostly hand forged nails. And then artifacts of Shaker or even pioneer associations, including clothing artifacts like buttons, tools, utensils, they occurred around the edges of this cluster. So this site appears to have been occupied by the Shakers in the early 1810s to early 1830s, although archival research is suggesting this could also be the original location of a Turtle Creek meeting house used by the pioneer families before Shakers arrived. If so, the Shakers must have converted it into a residential farm site because that's what the artifacts indicate. It was abandoned, certainly abandoned by the 1830s. Why it was abandoned and why it was never shown on early Shaker maps is still a mystery. So, here's the cellar. We manually excavated this with 4 large units. Most of the flagstone laid floor is here present. There wasn't any indication of a surviving foundation. So what we think is this means that when the Shakers took this building down, they robbed it down to the floor. This cellar floor measures about 16.5 feet north-south by 10 feet east-west, and it was covered with earth and stone rubble fill after the building removed. In the excavations of this fill, we recovered over 2,000 artifacts from here. And most of these are consistent with a Shaker occupation, particularly redware sherds, very similar to ones recovered from the waster dumps at the North family lot. The datable artifacts suggest deposition in the 1820s or early 1830s. Okay, I only got 2 minutes, so I'm gonna rush through here. We the 2 shaft field features that we were able to excavate privy in a well. One of the things about these that was kind of stymieing is both of these features were punched through a limestone shelf, which prevented further excavation. Never could get to the bottom of these. They also were filling up with water at the very end. So kind of odd. Privy was filled with bricks in this top half. And then when we got down to about where the water table was, we found an intact, really sturdy stone wood lining on that. Shaker brick clamp. This one was a little hard to, it was basically a lot of stains. We had a lot of geophysical survey identified what looked like buildings. We got out there, didn't look like that at all. We had maybe some staining from the clamp and then maybe from a charcoal storage and really nothing much of the way of features there. So what are we learning from Union Village archaeology? Well, we're learning the extent of how self-sufficient were they? They were able to do a lot of stuff on their own, rely on themselves, but there is just some of the artifacts indicate we are still reliant on the outside world for a lot of things. Basically, a lot of their serving and tablewares. We find lots of stuff that was not made by them. But we also find an interesting characteristic for significant data potential is if you have a Union Village site where the building was taken down by the Shakers, they just filled it in and left what was over in the bottom. At the North Family lot site, like for example, this was one of the stencils that we found. We found lots of craft tools. We found like a hat mold. We found all sorts of interesting things. Compare that to the pork shop, and it had gotten cleaned out. So there was hardly anything we found there that was of interesting. Interesting Shaker artifacts are significant. For pipes or pottery, pharmaceuticals, they made pipes there. So you find these nice redware pipes, little pipes all over the place at Shaker Village. Find one of these. One of these came out of that privy. And then their redware, they had a pottery that was at the Westbrook shop in the 1820s and in the 1830s at the North Family lot. And they made one of the distinct things is they make this really nice black glazed ware. I haven't seen it anywhere else except for really on Shaker sites. Found some of this up at the Green Tree Tavern, just north of Union Village. We did some recent excavations up there. So there's some interaction there. And we know they sold it to around the, Warren County area. The other thing we found was neat was there's a unity of form here. Lots of these buildings look alike. We determined they probably used a 25-foot grid interval to lay out their buildings, like a North Family Lot. All of these buildings fall on a grid, basically. We're all on a 25-foot grid. We're all on. We put a grid on a grid on a corner of the communal house, and all of these buildings just lined up perfectly. And we were finding the same thing is starting to show up at the West Frame lot as well. We're looking at that. So one of the things we need to kind of worry about here is this is a vanishing archaeological resource. This is a 1994 aerial photograph showing the different lot buildings. Development here is a big concern. This is what it looks like now. A lot of these buildings are going, a lot of these sites are gone or going away or being developed. And so one of the things we really need to focus on is preserving what's still left, particularly East Family Lot in the West Brick Lot probably have the highest potential. So anyone else who might be going out there to work, that's where you need to look. Keep in mind that 25-foot grid interval, you could probably use it to find buildings at these lots, even if they're not indicated by geophysical survey. So I'm probably gone over my time. So thanks a lot for listening to me go on about this, and I can take any questions. Okay, Al.
I don't have a question. I just want to, did you mention about the 4-volume?
Yes.
ODOT?
Yeah, there's a 4-volume report available on ODOT's website, the OES website, encountering the shakers of the North of Union Village. A little hint there is an error in the URL for the 4th volume. So if you copy that and change volume 3 to volume 4, you can get volume 4. And that's where all the ceramics are. So
the OAC, we were a consulting party on this as we are on a lot of ODOT projects, but my personal perspective is one of the best executed projects that we've been involved with. So I just want to congratulate on ODOT and CHIPO. Oh, I just want to congratulate all the organizations that were involved in it. It's really an exemplary project.
Any more questions?
I love the shaker stuff. So the picture that you showed of their fancy ceramics is not shaker-like. Obviously, they're using what's available, but is there evidence that changes over time as they're beginning to manufacture their own objects or perhaps less fancy, a little more plain and simple?
yeah, the question was there evidence over time that the shakers moved away from using some of the fancy outside ceramics, the stuff they made themselves? There is some evidence they tried to, but the problem with redware is it's really fragile and it breaks like crazy. So we did find evidence of them making plates. We actually found some evidence they actually even made their own decorated slipware plates, which is not what you would expect. We do have that evidence. We found North Family Lot, and we found some of that, I believe, the West or at Station Creek. But also we find evidence that they are still using. We're not even trying to select the plainer ceramics. Part of it might be because when you came into the shakers, you brought all your stuff with you.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it got distributed out. So even though we're using stuff that looks fancy, we're probably not actually going out and buying this stuff. It's just what's coming in with the converts.
Yeah. So interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Of note, I was curious, so I Googled it. While Andy was wrapping up, there are 3 shakers left and a community in Maine, evidently, as of last year, just 3. Interesting. So we're gonna take a break for lunch. We're gonna reconvene probably at 1:10, and that'll be the question and answer session with a representative from OHC. So please don't miss that. It should be interesting. If you have questions, you'll be able to ask them. We have some pre-asked questions that they're prepared to answer about program changes and a whole bunch of different issues. So we'll see you back at 1:10 after lunch.
One of those shakers is a new convert.
Yes, I saw that. Oh, and a quick reminder for those of you online, there is a different link, Zoom link for the afternoon session. So please make sure that you click on that afternoon link at 1:10 if you'd like to join the afternoon session. Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
People are saying this room, I have more stuff here.
Yeah, I'll be here. Okay.
Yeah.
So Beth, I should end this session.
For the membership.
No, I'm not going to.
Yeah, got it.
I'll record the question and answer session.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's going really well.